Wysteria, energy, twister. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and to the Encyclopedia of Faries. We're still on the M's. We're on Meg Mollach, one of the more famous brownie tales, and one of the few to feature a female brownie. Her name is found under several variations, including Meg Mollach, Meg Mollach, Meg Mollach, Maug Woluch, and Maggie Mollach, with the epithet Mollach, meaning hairy or shaggy. The basic form of the story, which can be found in multiple sources and variations, tells of a brownie who lurks in a mill. One night, a young woman comes into the mill by herself, and the brownie begins to harass her, slowly edging closer, asking her what her name is. The woman tells him that her name is Me Myself. The brownie continues to edge closer and bother the woman until she panics and throws boiling water on him, scolding him terribly. The young woman flees, and the mortally wounded brownie goes to Meg Mollach, either his mother or wife, depending on the story. But when she questions him about who has harmed him, all he can answer before dying is, Me, myself. This young woman's cleverness protects her for a time, until she is at a social event years later, tells the story to her friends. When she's done speaking, Meg Mollach appears, takes revenge for the death of her son or husband, depending on the tale, having overheard the unwitting confession. A late 19th century author places Meg Mollach and her son, simply named Brownie, as spirits of Strathspey, who were attached to a family named Grant, although he refers to them as ghosts. By that account, the story, anecdotally, is dated back to 1700s. Briggs in Folk Tales of England recounts a version of the above story taking place in Perthshire, when Meg Mollach is called Maggie Mollach and is referred to as a witch, although elsewhere she is clearly identified as a brownie. In stories where Meg Mollach appears alone, she acts as a typical brownie, taking on duties and chores around the farm. And that was 1976. Okay, so the next one obviously will seem obvious to you guys. Mermaids. They're found across a real variety of folklore, many cultures, including some Celtic language countries like Ireland, although it's possible they were imported into Western Europe from the Mediterranean. Simpson and Roud in the Dictionary of English Folklore suggest that this occurred during the medieval period, and that while Celtic areas may have had mermaids prior to that, they would have been tailless. As the folklore stands currently, their characteristics are generally consistent. A mermaid appears as an attractive human woman from the waist up, and a fish from the waist down is usually described with a mirror or a comb. Mermaids may appear in either salt or fresh water. There are several tales, like the Lard of Lonte, which features freshwater mermaids who are otherwise indistinguishable from the ocean variety. In the sea they are seen by sailors, on outcroppings of rock in the ocean, sometimes disappearing before they can be approached, sometimes luring ships into the shallow water where they are wrecked. They sing, and their voices are much as their appearance draw men to their doom. They can also be omens of storms and bad weather. While modern mermaids, much like other modern fairies, are often romanticised into more gentle and helpful beings, historic folklore paints a very different picture. Older tales of mermaids describe them as intentionally drowning sailors, sometimes eating them, maybe only half eating them. One Welsh tale claims that Padstow Harbour is full of sandbars because of a mermaid who was angry at being shot at by a human. So to avenge this attack, she ruined the harbour. There is some small debate as to whether mermaids are fairies or not, and for a long time mermaids have been viewed as natural creatures rather than otherworldly. The beliefs that mermaids were real would world beings was deeply ingrained across cultures and led to the perpetuation of sightings and of many alleged mermaid bodies being exhibited. Like other types of fairies, however, mermaids in Celtic lore were said to sometimes be captured as wives, or to willingly take human lovers, and children were produced from these unions, like the children of humans and selkies. They would have webbed hands and feet. They were also known to pass on great knowledge to their past human children, especially of healing. Mermaids might be intentionally captured or accidentally pulled up in fishing nets. If captured, they could grant wishes, but while they would keep to the exact letter of any bargain they made to gain their freedom, they would also do what they could to ensure their wishes brought misfortune rather than actual blessing. Not all stories of mermaids are so grim, and it's true that their favour could be earned through acts of selfless kindness, in which case they might offer knowledge to a person or vital help. According to some sources, mermaids will die if they are out of water for too long, losing their physical form, melting into some other substance. There is also one account of a mermaid who was driven off by Christian prayers. Outside of these accounts, folklore offers little in the way of how to combat mermaids or ward against them, besides simply just avoiding them, obviously, which seems the right thing to do. The Mikol. Mikol is another commonly invoked fairy queen. A name is found variations and spellings, different pronunciations. Mikol, Michael, Mikol, Michel, Niob, Mycob, as well as Michael and Michael even. And that's a lot of different names, right? Under the variant form of Mienia, it is possible that Mikol might be Milia, found grouped sometimes with Sibylla, although we more often see her explicitly invoked with Titam and Verfex, possibly a variant form of Ma. Maybe not, but maybe so. It's hard to say because she's given that many names. She has knowledge of herbs, stones, trees, medicines, and the truth, as well as providing a ring of invisibility, and was described as being very gentle and kind. So at least she's not so, what's the word I'm looking for? Evil, right? I mean, most of them are. Mine fairies. This type of fairy can be found all over Europe, as well as in other countries settled by European peoples, such as United States. Called the Coblinu in Wales, Cabolds and Wishlane in Germany, Knockers in England, and Tommyknockers in the USA. They are found in any mine being worked by humans, can be helpful, but they can be harmful. Mine fairies, or as we call them, knockers, are always seen as male and can appear in size, anywhere from 2 to 6 feet tall. They are generally described as small, wizened men with beards, and either blue or red hats. Mine fairies usually dress to mimic the miners while working near them, so their appearance changes slightly with the times. But they're always seen carrying miniature pickaxes and other mining tools. They tend to be very secretive and are easily upset if they catch anyone looking at them, so it's more common to see than hear this type of fairy if you work in a mine. There are stories of helpful knockers who would rap or knock on the walls of the mine shaft to indicate the locations of ore deposits, which is one possible origin of their name. In England, they are known on occasion to warn miners of impending disasters, such as cave-ins, by creating weird noises to get the miners out of the dangerous area. In other cases, if they favoured a particular miner, they would wait until he was alone, and then appear next to him, working alongside, so that he could accomplish far more than any of the other miners could alone. Many times in such tales, his jealous co-workers would eventually sneak back after him to find the source of his productivity, only to be spotted by the knocker, who would react violently. In one such story from the US, The enraged knockers turned on their human friend, believing he had betrayed their secret, caused the entire mine to explode to flames. In the case of the Coblinu, they are viewed as more of a nuisance than anything else, being known to confuse miners with repeated knockings on the walls of the mine, as well as appearing to miners. Those who were not frightened away at seeing the fairies noted that despite looking as if they were working frantically, nothing was ever accomplished. Mine fairies can also be very mischievous, playing pranks on miners by hiding equipment and leading men astray in the tunnels. At their worst, mine fairies can be deadly. The Coblinu, when insulted, are known to start rock slides, and all forms of mine fairies are said to start fires in mines when angered. In Germany, kobolds are considered malicious, being fond of cruel jokes and tormenting every single miner they come in contact with. The witched lane is an omen of death, which will be seen or heard knocking 3 times shortly before the doomed person meets their fate. There is no way to banish or remove mine fairies. If they are present, they can only be treated with respect in hopes of avoiding any disaster. Morgans, also sometimes spelled Morgans, a water fairy found in Wales, an obscure being in folklore said to drag away misbehaving children. They're now considered male, though. Yes, in the older stories, they were rooted in mythology of Morgan le Fay. This confusion about the Morgan's gender may be a reflection of the confusion from the spelling of various forms of the name, Morgan and Morgan, and the gender that attached to those spellings. So it's probably just a confusion, and they're generally now said to be female more than male, but who's to know? Morgane le Fay. She's a character, yes. First found in Arthurian stories, specifically the 12th century works of Geoffrey of Monmouth it is, where her name was initially spelled Morgane le Fay. It's worth noting that this spelling is significant, because while both Morgan and Morgane are men's names, yes, they are prominently and pronounced differently. Morgan evolved into the modern Welsh Morcant, while Morgen became Morien. In the 12th century, Morgen would have been pronounced roughly Moyen, and the name Morgen is generally believed to mean seaborn, so it's spelled Morgen, but it was more traditionally back in the day, in the 12th century, was pronounced Moryen. Geoffrey was collecting local stories from Wales and publishing them in France, and while he certainly didn't invent Moyen for his Viti Mellini, there is no way to know for certain how much or little he shaped the character as he preserved her, which in fairness is true for all the Arthurian characters he wrote about. They could be real, they could be fiction, who knows? Geoffrey's Moyen was a priestess, one of the 9 sisters connected to Avalon. In the 15th century, Moyen would be renamed Morgan by Thomas Malory and recast as King Arthur's scheming half-sister, who was set against, yes, both Arthur and his wife, Guinevere. Moyen is connected to healing and perhaps to guiding the dead or dying to Avalon or the other world. Moyens or Morgens. They're a kind of water spirit found in Breton lore. They seem to be very much like the Welsh Morgans. The Murians. Cornish fairies, the size of ants. The name Murians means ants, and is a name given to any fairy that shrunk to that size, I guess. In Cornish belief, fairies had their origins in humanity, but had become trapped by various means in the world of fairy, and shifted into a new existence. It was believed that they had once been human-sized, but had shrunk over time, becoming smaller every time they changed their shape to that of a bird or an animal, until they eventually were reduced to the height of ants, before then disappearing entirely, which is interesting. The Morucha. It's an Irish fairy similar to traditional mermaids, are found elsewhere, but with some notable differences. In some folklores, they are described very much like other mermaids, but with the upper torso of a human and the lower half of a fish. Meadows also have webbed hands. Females are extremely beautiful, but males are hideously ugly, with green-tinted skin, deep-set red eyes. One difference with the Morucha is that they can shapeshift and travel on land with the aid of a red feather hat. This allows them to take the shape of a hornless cow. Although, if that is stolen from them, well, they're trapped on land forever. As with many other kinds of fairies, the Morucha are known to occasionally take human lovers and produce children with them. Children born from the union of the Moruch and immortal are said to look very human, except they will have some scales. Morucha are sometimes associated with storms, and seen as omens of bad weather. But more often in folklore, they appear in helpless roles or helpful roles, so they can be good or bad. Kind of depends on the story itself, I guess. That's what they're saying. They can be unseen as helpless, meaning they just stand by and let things happen in a storm, or they can be seen as helpful, where they actually engage with human activity and help in a storm. So they are a lot like mermaids, with just a few differences, I guess. Anyway, that is the rest of the M's for our fairies. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit the like, share if you can, and do consider subscribing. Many blessings.
Wysteria, energy, twister.